Whispers from Below, a horror podcast by Justin W. Geis. Scary stories, both real and fake. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 1 of Whispers from Below, a podcast by a madman for madmen. I'm your resident psychopath, Justin W. Geis, and today's topic of discussion is Tusk. For those of you that don't know, Tusk is like this really, really awful film that's like kind of spooky, but like not really. It's like pretty comedical was what I wanted to say. That's like not a thing. It's pretty comedic or comical. I just tried to combine the two and it didn't work out. Before I start the episode, I just want to say once again, and I know I'll say it at the end of the episode as well, but I want to do it now while a lot of you are, still with me and listening. Please go check out the website. The website is whispersfrombelow.com. I spent a lot of time on it. It's super duper cool. You can sign up to be a member. You get updates. There's tons of new merch. There's all sorts of cool stuff. So please go check it out and tell all your friends about it. The second thing I want to say is that this episode, I would say, isn't too bad as far as like things that we're going to talk about. The film itself can be a little disturbing visually, especially if you're a younger viewer. But what we're going to talk about today for the most part is like pretty chill, pretty funny. It's overall plays more to the comedic side than the horror side. But, I just want to preface that, like, this episode might not be for everybody, and that's totally okay. If this week's episode, whoa, oh my God, I don't know what just happened. If this week's episode isn't for you, always try to come back next week. I try to change up styles, so, like, let's say you really don't like when I talk about, like, things that are funnier or when I do my movie reviews or things like that. That's totally fine. Come back next week. I'm probably going to talk about people that were murdered. It's like, you just gotta sort of wait and see what each week will bring. But I like to get episodes that are for everybody, and I know people like when I talk about movies because I'm very strange about how I talk about them. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get into the episode. So just a little background on the movie. It was made I don't know when it was made. It was released in 2014 as a horror comedy film. It's written and directed by Kevin Smith, and it was the first film in Smith's, what he called his True North trilogy. The True North trilogy features, in this order, Tusk, that came out in 2014, Yoga Hosers, I can't say that without the accent, in 2016, and Moose Jaws, which is still like in production / might not be happening / probably will happen, but we're still waiting to see like when Moose Jaws is going to come out. It premiered in the Toronto International Film Festival and then was released on September 19th, 2014 by A24. It features a pretty good cast, honestly. Like, the cast is, like, kind of stacked. Like, it's not, like, stacked, but, like, it has good people in it. You have Michael Parks, who's in Kill Bill, Justin Long, who was in, like, Jeepers Creepers, and Dodgeball. You have Haley Joel Osment, like, Sixth Sense. He voices Sora in Kingdom Hearts, which I found out when I was doing my research, and I was like, that's super cool. And Johnny Depp is in this movie. And I know you don't believe me, but yes. Johnny Depp is in this movie. Also Harley, I think Morstein or something like that, who I believe is a YouTube personality. I don't know much about him, but I know the name, so I wanted to mention that he's in it as well. He's like the customs agent or whatever at the airport. But anyway, it's got a pretty good cast of people, and they all commit to what they're doing really well. It's just that what they're doing isn't great, if that makes sense. So the film opens on Justin Long, who plays Wallace, and Haley Joel Osment, who plays Teddy, recording their podcast. Isn't that hilarious? It's like podcastception, which they call the Nazi Party. And they do it like the Nazi Party. It's supposed to be like a joke about like Nazis with a Z, but they make it clear they're like, It's the Nazi party, like Notsee party, not like Nazi, like the hateful kind. And then I just wrote, oh wow, what a start. Because like what a bold choice to start with a Nazi joke, like right off the bat in a film. They start talking about this video that a fan sent in. Supposedly he bought this laptop from like a yard sale, and on it was like this video. And it's a video of a guy. They say he's like supposed to be in high school, like they keep calling him like the kid or whatever, but like he's clearly like a middle-aged man, which I think makes it a little bit funnier. And they dub him the Kill Bill Kid, which I think they do on purpose as like a nice little nod to Michael Parks and his role, just a little like, there you go. And he's like, the video shows him like swinging a sword around in his garage, and he ends up cutting his leg off. And it's like really bad, like CGI gore. Like it's very clearly fake and it's not well done. And then they're like laughing at it. And then I just wrote, what an asshole. And then I wrote the quote, Wallace goes, did he keep the leg or did he get rid of it? I'm like, what a fucking asshole. And then I wrote, like, clearly they're both, like, kind of assholes. Like, that's the point, is, like, they're both supposed to be kind of, like, frat boy dickheads. Like, that's, like, the gist of what they do. But Wallace is definitely, like, the larger asshole of the two. The more gaping of the two. He's very open about his douchiness. And it comes across with flying colors. Then they announced that Wallace is going to fly to Canada to meet the kid that ended up cutting his leg off. And then they sort of talk about like, all right, he's going to go there and he's going to interview him. And they explain how the podcast works, which is basically like he flies somewhere because Teddy doesn't fly anywhere. So like he won't go anywhere. But Wallace will fly somewhere and like interview people or talk to like weird people that made funny videos or whatever. And then he'll get back and sort of explain the interview to Teddy, who wasn't there, thus the like Nazi party. And you sort of can tell that it's like a pretty big podcast. Like clearly they have like money. They have like a whole recording studio with like a foosball table, and they have like a bunch of fan art in the background. And then when he gets to the airport, he meets the customs dude, and this is where you can sort of tell that it's more comedy based and less like, yes, there's horror aspects to it, obviously, which is part of what makes it funny. But like you can tell that they threw in bits like this. He starts talking about your canna do's and your canna don'ts, which I just think is hilarious. He's like, canna do, like maple syrup, whatever. And he's like, canna don't. Don't talk about how you don't like hockey. Sorry to all of my Canadian listeners here. And then he talks about how America invented sadness. He's like, well, what do you see when you look at that flag? Like, your American flag is red, white, and blue. But, like, our flag is red, white, and never blue. Because we're never blue here in Canada. And I just thought that was really funny. And it, like, comes back later, which is, like, also really funny. Like, we love a callback joke. So he ends up getting through customs fine. There's, like, a weird moment when, like, he's explaining the podcast to the guy. And he says, like, Nazi. And then the guy's like, don't say Hitler in an airport. Which is just like another little like funny moment. But then like you never see that guy again. He ends up driving over to the house, and you see that there's a funeral taking place. And in the wheelchair of the kid is like a picture of him, and you can kind of tell that the kid like killed himself, which is like really unfortunate. But then it cuts to Wallace being a fucking asshole and like calls Teddy to like complain that the kid killed himself. And he's like, wasted my money coming up here. I'm in some bar called like H, and like fuck this kid. Like I'm just gonna get drunk and like see if I can find something because I wasted my money here. Like, what a selfish asshole. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this kid killed himself. Like you're the worst. Just ugh. Then he decides he has to go to the bathroom. This is one of many scenes where we see people going to the bathroom in this movie. And they all happen very quickly, which I think is strange. But while he's like pissing in the urinal, he sees an advertisement for, it's like a handwritten, like old parchment paper looking note. And it's just like, I'm an old eccentric man and I have like lots of stories to tell. And like, if you come over, like I'll rent you a room for free as long as you do chores around the house. But like, I need you to like listen to my stories. Like I have them to share and I want to share them. I want to continue to share them. So he calls and he decides to visit the man that night. And while he's on the phone, it's like a big gulp, but I think it's called like a chug-a-lug in the movie or something like that. And he talks to these two bitchy girls behind the counter. And he's like, okay, well, how far away am I from like blank point or whatever? And they're like, oh, that's really far away. You're like 2 hours away. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he like writes down the address on like a pad of paper. And then I paused it at that point to write notes. And if you look in the background, this is just like a fun little tidbit. They have t-shirts there, and one of the attendants has one on too. They have t-shirts that say red, white, but never blue. Which just like really cracked me up. And then their name tags say A to Z, but like EH, and then the number 2, and then Z like A to Z, but like A to Z, which I guess is like the name of the convenience store, I think. But anyway, so, again, over the like voiceover thing, he's talking about the room for rent. And he's like, just listen to my stories, whatever. So he gets to this like spooky mansion and just like walks in, doesn't knock on the door, doesn't check if anybody's home, parks his car and fully walks into a stranger's house. And I wrote in all caps, he just walked in, ? Like, I just don't understand what goes through your brain to be like, I'm just gonna, like, I know I'm meeting this person, but like, you still knock. Like, I don't just like walk into my friend's apartment when I go to hang out with them. Like, you knock, you like announce your presence. Just walk into someone's home. It's like, Anyway, you meet the old man who is played by Parks. His name is like Mr. Howard Howe, which, oh my God. But he says he like prefers the intimacy of Howard or Howe. He starts like trying to talk to Wallace a little bit, but it's like kind of awkward. And then Wallace is like, I have to go take a piss. And so for the second time within 12 minutes of the film, we see him pee yet again. And they like spend time when he's peeing. Like, it's not like he goes to the bathroom and comes back. Like, it's like we're with him when he's peeing, And there's like a weird like macrame, like creepy toilet cozy doll. And he like turns it around. It's like a whole bit. But it's like, why did we have to see you peeing for the second time in 12 minutes? I don't really understand that. Anyway, so he goes back to the thing He goes back to like the fireplace area, which is where he's talking to the old man. And Howard offers him some tea and then like crosses his leg. Like, granted, like he picks it up a little, but he clearly does that little, like, when people like go to put on a jacket and they do like a little flick to like make sure that the sleeves are down. He did like that, but with his leg. So like he kicks it, but he's like carrying it. So it's clear that the wheelchair is kind of like an act. So he like crosses his leg. And then I wrote, oh my God, he crossed his leg again, but this time he didn't even touch it. And it's like very clear in the scenes that like he goes from like crossed leg to uncrossed. But Wallace is such a fucking idiot that he like doesn't notice it. So like as the audience, you're like, oh, the chair is fake. Like, it's not a surprise later in the film when he, like, spoilers, like, stands up. Oh my God, I also should have said this. I'm literally giving a play-by-play of this film. So if you want to watch it and you don't want spoilers, like, please stop listening. But anyway, it's, like, clear that the wheelchair is, like, an act from the get-go. So it makes it less shocking when he, like, stands up later. But then they start talking. I said there's some weird dialogue between them. Because Howard is a very, like, prim and proper man, and he speaks in, like, proverb. And Wallace is like a douchey frat boy asshole. So when they talk to each other, it's like very uncomfortable. And then he sort of explains what the podcast is. And Howard mentions that he thinks that younger generations have like so much more freedom than he did. And then he starts telling a story about how he supposedly met Ernest Hemingway. And he spins us a yarn about how he knew, quote unquote, Ernie, when he was a cook on a boat right before D-Day. And then he tells this story about how basically like he got Ernest Hemingway like whiskey or something like that, and then they drank the whiskey together, and then he has the bottle like up by the like not hung up, but like on a shelf by the fireplace. And so like he talks about how like, well, that's just a simple whiskey bottle, but when you attach a story to it, it becomes something fascinating. And then he says, only do sober what you do drunk. It will teach you to keep your mouth shut. And I just thought, wow, That's a great sentiment. And I really love that. And supposedly it's an Ernest Hemingway sentiment. So then there's like a weird scene where he's like, "Oh, what's that?" Like Wallace is like, "What's that on top of the fireplace?" And he's like, "Well, it's the blank 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 of like a walrus and blah blah blah." And then he starts touching it. And then he's like, "So I'm touching like a walrus bone?" And he's like, "You're touching a walrus cock." Literally like that. And it's so like jarring. And like I was watching this movie with my boyfriend and he was like, "Did he just say that?" Like it's just so like out of character. So, yes. I found this out through this film. Apparently in a lot of mammals to help with coitus, they will have like an actual physical bone that is in their penis so that they can like keep going, without fear of like erectile dysfunction like humans have. Um, so that's a walrus bone, basically a walrus penis. And he explains what the purpose of it is, and he explains that it's like a walrus dick. And Wallace has like this weird moment where he like jerks it off like onto his face, like he explains that like walrus he believes are more intelligent than men. Like as Wallace is like jerking off a walrus dick, it was just like one of those moments where you're like, yeah, they probably are. And then that segues into him telling a story about how he had his life saved by a walrus in 1959. Wallace, throughout this whole story, you can kind of see him like dipping like in and out, like his eyes are getting heavy and he's sort of like fallen everywhere, but he's still like conscious and present. But you also see him continually drinking the tea, and Howard is not drinking the tea, which is a bad sign. So I guess he was on this boat, supposedly. In 1959, he got on a boat looking for the great white shark off of the coast of Siberia. At night, they hit an iceberg and the ship sank, and he ended up stranded in the ocean. And then, like, this spooky music, like, cuts in. He ended up swimming to an island, and he says, "I saw my savior, a walrus." And it's supposed to be like a dramatic line reading, but it just, like, really made me laugh. The idea of someone being like, "My life was saved by a walrus," just, like, really got me. Anyway, so he talks about this walrus. And how the walrus like held him really close in his blubber to like keep him warm at night. And he named him Mr. Tusk after like some janitor that he met at a boys. He drops that he was like in an all boys like school or like orphanage or whatever. And the janitor was really sweet and his name was like Mr. Tuskegee. And so he named the walrus Mr. Tusk. And Wallace says that it's cute. And then Howard has this weird like line, and this came out in 2014, which I think would be a point when like you wouldn't put this in a film, but he's like, "Cute is for Chinese babies. Mr. Tusk was beautiful." And it's just like, what kind of statement is that? Like, it's not even like necessarily like an offensive statement. I mean, like it is, but like also it's just confusing. It doesn't make sense. Like it was just a weird statement, and I had to pause and write it down because I was just like, I don't know why that had to be said. Apparently he ended up living for 6 months with the walrus, and then Wallace like basically passes out, and as he's passing out, Howard looks at him as like, "Good night, Mr. Tusk." Cut to him like almost coming with his girlfriend and her like kind of giving him blue balls, and they end up getting into a fight because she doesn't want him to go to Canada. And she's trying to talk to him about how, like, she doesn't really know who he is anymore. And he starts to describe basically how, like, old Wallace was, like, a hack and wasn't funny and was a huge nerd. And now he's super successful. And, like, fuck old Wallace. Like, I'm new Wallace and I have money and I'm successful. And, like, don't you want that? It's like a couple fight. It's like a pretty basic movie couple fight that you would imagine. There's, like, a random, like, kind of offensive Latino accent that he does like at her, and it's like not cute, and she also like doesn't have an accent. It's like clear that that's like her ethnicity, right? Like we can tell that like that's her cultural background, but then he just like whips that out and he's like, "That's what you sound like," and it's like it's like clearly offensive and gross, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like you're such an asshole." But then they end up having sex. which is just kind of like gross. And then you cut again, like as he's like, like, and it starts to fade to black. It cuts to like the same similar, not the same, but like similar moaning noises of him waking up, in the mansion. So kind of like I would say like a decently clever fade from like one scene to another. Just like an interesting note of like how similar those sounds are was like, I don't know. I thought it was actually kind of cool. I wrote down actually kind of good. And then I wrote wheelchair alert in all caps. Because now all of a sudden he's in a wheelchair and Howard is in the corner in his wheelchair, but he's polishing a tusk. And you find out like later in the film, which I guess like isn't really like a spoiler, but you find out later in the film that the tusks that he makes are from the bones that he takes from you. So he starts spinning that'll come in. I'll explain more after I get there. But it'll make sense, trust me. So he starts spinning this story about how he had passed out because he was bitten by a brown recluse and they're really common out here. And then he's like, can I get my phone? And he's like, unfortunately, the doctor had stepped on it and broke it. So you can't call anybody. Like, we don't have any phones here. And like, we all know that there isn't a doctor. Like, he hands him his Chug-a-Lug cup. And so he's drinking the Chug-a-Lug cup. He says that he can't feel his legs. And so he like removes the blanket to reveal that his left leg is amputated from the knee down. This is where I meant like the bones that he takes from the victim, he makes into a tusk to then later install into the victim so that it's the same. He doesn't have to worry about like blood types or body types like not coinciding and getting like sepsis. Sepsis? Is that what it is? Right? Like you would get like septic when you're like infection and dying, basically. Because like that's kind of like what happens in like Human Centipede. And so to like avoid that, he kind of like uses your own body parts. Anyway, we'll get there. So he's like, why the fuck am I not in a hospital? Why is my leg amputated? And he's like, well, I couldn't get you there. And the doctor, blah, 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 wanted you to stay here. He thought it would be a good idea. Wallace says he wants to talk to the doctor. We all know that there isn't a doctor. And Wallace is like pretty much decided that there's not a doctor. And Howard is saying like, well, you can't. He's doing his rounds. And then when he goes to lean forward, he's like, wait, what the fuck is this? And Howard explains that he's strapped into a wheelchair in order to like keep him from falling when he's like passing out and stuff, which is actually a thing and it makes sense, but also like in this context it's a little creepy. And then he just starts like laughing at Wallace, which is like very random. He explains that there are no phones in the house because the doctor removed them so that he wouldn't be disturbed, which is like also really suspect. Like that's just not, it's not it. It's really suspect and it just shouldn't, it's not a good excuse. He should have just been like, we don't have phones in the house. Like, I just don't have phones here. Because then he could have been like, oh, well, I called you earlier. And he would have been like, oh, that's a landline. That's like a ways away. Like, it's not here. But like, I was told that I was getting a call and I wanted to, return the call or whatever. Could have been an easier excuse. But he goes for the crazy answer. And he says that after supper, if he is a good, like basically like a good boy, then he can do a call. And they supper at 6 p.m. sharp. It cuts to them having like around like a long dinner table. And he's like, oh, you're not eating. And he's like, I can't move my arms. Like I can't feel them. So then I said segue into Itsy Bitsy Spider, which is like, it's just so, it's funny and also like so cringy. Like he starts talking about the brown recluse and then like starts singing Itsy Bitsy Spider. And Wallace is just like, what the fuck? And the audience is just like, what the fuck? And then they start like fighting more and Wallace is like questioning too much and he starts screaming. And then Howard stands up and the music is like intense. And you can tell that it was like meant to be like sort of like a surprise that he could stand. Like, oh my God, it's crazy. But like we all kind of knew that he could stand because he kept crossing his legs. So like we knew that he wasn't paralyzed and they didn't set up any like real suspense with that. But so he stands up and he walks across the room and slaps him and then like returns to his chair to eat. And then he sort of explains that he's been building a walrus suit, and Wallace is going to become the walrus. But he's saying, like, you can't make any human sounds or any human actions because I need you to be a walrus, because I'm trying to find out the age-old question, is man indeed a walrus at heart? Let me just let you know right now, that is not an age-old question. That is a question basically only asked in this film and never again, because nobody thinks that man is a walrus. Um, it just, it's so funny because they're both great actors, and the actress that plays Allie, I didn't write her name down. She's fantastic in the film, 100% amazing, fantastic actress. But like what they're given is so strange and like out there that their performances are like so unbelievable, but they're so committed to the stupid shit that's happening. It just makes it really quite fantastic. Um, then they start to like scream, moan at one another. And then it cuts to Allie giving this like really intense emotional like dialogue, where she's like crying and it's like a slow zoom into her face. There are a couple monologues that are like that throughout the film. But this one is like she's sobbing and it's so emotional and heartfelt and deep. And I was like, if this wasn't in this movie, this would be a great monologue. I don't know about you, but I personally hate having to go to the grocery store. It takes up so much of my day when I could be starting a new hobby with that time, like soap carving, or collecting the sick bags out of airplanes. With Instacart, it makes grocery shopping fast and easy, all while allowing me to stay in my underwear. Instacart allows you to order all of the things you usually get from your local stores, delivered to your door in as fast as 1 hour. Not only that, but it will also give you smart suggestions for new items based off of your preferences, as well as highlight deals to help you save some money. The shoppers handpick perfect produce and make sure that your eggs get to you safely. You can get free delivery on your first order over $35 by following the link in the show notes. This also lets Instacart know that we sent you, and it helps support Whispers from Below. So if you hate grocery shopping as much as I do, try Instacart today and enjoy getting your groceries the easy way. Then you see her like grab a guy's hand and be like, I need you, like you're what keep me sane and whole when Wallace is like ruining my life and whatever. I wish my dad couldn't see me like this and whatever. And then it cuts to Teddy like defending Allie, being like, well, she just wants to go with you to Canada, dude. And then Wallace is like, ah, gosh, Teddy, like you're always defending Allie. And you're like, oh, I get it, because Wallace is like, I'm not going to take Allie to Canada because I'm not the same when I'm with her. Like, I'm not as funny when I'm with her. But then when he's talking to Allie earlier in the film, she's like, take me to Canada. And he's like, I don't want to take you to Canada because Teddy thinks that I'm not as funny when you're with me. So he's like actively lying to both of them, and they both know that he's lying to them. And then they start talking about how Wallace is cheating on her. I just said he's shown being a huge asshole again. He's just kind of the worst. Like the scene is like, he's like, you know, Allie is like super hot, right? And Wallace is like, yeah, like I know she's super hot, but there's a lot of ass out there and like blah blah blah. And then he's like, I'm gonna see her tonight before I go. And he was like, oh, like one more night together. And he's like, yeah. I'm hoping that I can get some head before I go. And he's like, dude, you're a fucking asshole. And he's like, I know, but you know, I get the whiteout and then I sleep like a baby. It's my Xanax, it's my drug or whatever. Just like such an asshole. And then it goes back to like Teddy and, oh, well, spoiler, not really spoiler, but like surprise, the hand that Allie's like being comforted with is Teddy's hand. And she hears her phone ringing, and so she goes to find it, but it's him. It's like him calling. No, scratch that. It's not Allie. She tries to call him. He hasn't called in 3 days. So she plugs her phone in, brushes her teeth, and then goes and lays on the bed. Then we see her phone ringing, but she's not there to pick it up, and she can't hear it because now her phone is like basically on silent. Teddy sees his phone like ringing, but he just watched Allie like sob in the bed, so he's like, I'm not picking up the phone. Fuck that shit. So he like leaves it. In the house, you see Allie like trying to call him, and Wallace is like, I hear my phone, I hear my phone, I hear my phone. So he like wheels his way through the house. Suddenly his arms work again, whatever. So he wheels his way through the house, and he finds his phone and he calls her and is like leaving a message that's like, this is what's happening, like it's crazy, oh my god, I'm gonna die here. There's this man named Howard Howe, he's trying to kill me. I'm like 2 hours north of Manitoba, whatever. And then he goes to call Teddy, and like in the background of the phone call, you sort of see Howard like walking around, and then he knocks him out by hitting him really hard in the head. They receive the messages like the next morning because they go to bed, and she's listening to the voicemail while brushing her teeth and I think peeing, like all at the same time. And I was like, boy, that is more than I can function after just getting up in the morning. Like, I need time to like process things before I start doing all of that. And so she like runs to Teddy and she's like, oh my god, we gotta go find him. We gotta we gotta figure it out. We gotta get him, blah blah blah. Then we have this really weird monologue from Howard. But we sort of see him like clearly doing like a surgical thing, like he's sewing, and you find out that what he's doing is sewing his arms to his body and removing the other leg from the knee down. And by sewing his arms to sewing his arms to his body, I mean like he's using skin to sort of sew over from like the elbow up, so that he just kind of has like his forearm down as like an appendage now, much like a walrus fin, I guess. So he says this really weird monologue about how like he became an orphan because he watched his parents get murdered, and he was placed into a boys' home, and the boys' home like raped and tortured and abused him in this weird scheme where they would let people do whatever they wanted so that they could get money for it. And all of this is happening while you're sort of getting a vibe of the like surgical operating room. And there's like all this like anatomy drawn up of walruses and walrus people hybrids. And like you see Wallace's foot is like on ice. And every once in a while his bloody glove, he like wipes his nose with his bloody glove, which like makes me anxious because you're gonna get blood on your nose, and that's just not a good scenario. And then he explains that he escaped when he was 15, and that's when he got on the first boat, which landed him the job as the cook during D-Day and like all that stuff. So it's all like starting to tie together or whatever. Teddy and Allie are going to search for Wallace. Like this is a point in the film where it keeps like cutting back and forth. And so you sort of see Teddy and Allie like calling the police, and they're like, she's talking on the phone and she's like, oh my god, this is what happened. We got to search for Wallace. And then she was like, he's in for like a podcast. He was in Canada, whatever. And they're like, oh, what podcast? And she's like, it's the Nazi party. And then they hang up because like you just said Nazi to a police officer. Like fucking duh. Also, we're all well aware that the American police are not necessarily the most competent. So they like hang up. Then you see the human walrus creature chained to a big rock in this like, it's like a zoo exhibit, basically. There's like projections of like seagulls and crashing waves on the back. And then there's like a little moat of water, and then like a big rock that he's on in the middle. But it looks pretty much like a zoo exhibit. And of course it's Wallace. Wallace is the walrus. The suit is like it's not it, sis. It's a really bad looking suit. What I will say though is like as cartoony as the suit looks, the application of the suit onto him, like you can see in close-up shots there are seams around his eyes of where the face mask, the face prosthetic like sort of attaches. But they did a really good job with like hiding the seams like in the bags of his eyes and stuff. So like you don't really notice them. Like the only reason I do is because I actively look for things like that. Those of you that don't know like a little bit of my like past / history or whatever, my family and I love watching the show Face Off. Not the film, the TV show, and it's all about special effects makeup. And as you can all see now, like if you go over to like my personal Instagram, like basically all I've been posting lately is like me wearing makeup, like beauty makeup and stuff like that. But I got started into that world and industry through special effects makeup. If you scroll way down in my Instagram, you can see me like putting a soda can in my eye, and doing like the stitches up the mouth, very like Joker, bruises, bloody cuts, like things like that, zombies, like I did all sorts of crazy stuff. And that's how I sort of got introduced into the world of makeup. And so when I watch films like this, where there's very clearly a big portion of the film is supposed to be this makeup job, I always check for like seams. Like I'll even pause the movie and zoom in and like look. And the seams on this one are really well done. Like even though it's a shitty prosthetic and it's like a really shitty suit, the application of the shitty suit was good, if that makes any sense. The paint job is just very cartoony, and I know that, well, I don't know. I assume that that was an intentional choice to drive home the comedy aspect of it, but it's just like really funny to me. But anyway, he's like chained to a big rock in the basement. There's like much groaning, there's much screaming, there's a lot of like weird walrus noises. And then it cuts again to Allie and Teddy, who are trying to find Wallace. So they go to the local police in Manitoba and they issue a missing persons report. He mentions that Wallace said he was missing a leg, and he's like, oh, well, we just dismissed this private investigator for, searching for a serial killer here in Canada, but like we don't have serial killers here in Canada. So like, I don't know what he's talking about. He's crazy. So we released him, but he's looking for people with legless bodies. Then it cuts back to the walrus, and there's like a chain attached to his leg, and the chain starts to like drag Wallace into the water because Howard like wants to like see him swim or whatever. So he like pushes a button and the chain starts pulling him into the water. He's like groaning and screaming. It goes on for like a little bit too long. And when he lands in the water, he sees a quote unquote, I'm using like air quotes, walrus corpse at the bottom of the water. So this is like very clearly not the first time that Howard has attempted to make Mr. Tusk. This is just the time that we are seeing, but he sees like the walrus corpse. It's kind of funny. It almost looks like something out of like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but it's pretty funny. And then cut to Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is in this movie. Just like, I watched this, so full disclosure, I watched this with my dad like a couple months ago when I was back home in Cincinnati after surgery. And then I watched it again because I was like, oh, this will make a great like season 3 opener episode because it's so stupid and ridiculous. And I watched it again with my boyfriend. So I've seen this movie twice now. But when I was watching it with my dad, at this point in the film, we were like, I wonder if they told Johnny Depp what the film was about. Like, I wonder if they just gave him like a line and they were like, does this seem like fun? And he was like, sure. But I don't think he truly knew what the movie was about until they were like shooting it. And he was like, wait, what? Like, I think he just thought he was like a weird, crazy investigator, like looking for a serial killer. And then all of a sudden was like, wait, this serial killer is like a walrus man? Like, oh my God. But Johnny Depp is in this movie. And he plays La Pointe, or something like that. La Pointe or whatever. Who's like this like really crazy detective that has been hunting Howard for like a long time. I just wrote, why is he here? Sorry, I like had to really take that in. I just wrote like, why is he here? Like he's like way too talented and like a big budget person to like be in this movie. Like, why are you here? He ends up pouring a bunch of booze from a flask into his milkshake. Also, they're at like, what is it, a Gimli burger or a Gimli slider or something like that. And he's talking about how much he loves the food. He has like a really, I think it's supposed to be a French accent. It's a very interesting accent. And he talks about how the bodies have sort of been tampered with. And this is where you get more of a basis of like, you can tell that the director, like, and, the writer, because they're the same person, like, he did think out how this was done. Not well, but you can tell that he did put, like, a little bit of effort into it. So he starts describing that like the bodies like don't have tongues, the tongue is fully cut out, they have these two huge holes in the roof of their mouths, and they don't know what's being put up there. Their, arms are sewn to their sides, they're missing their legs, stuff like that. Like he's describing how everything works. And then he says that for a while they named him the first wife killer, because your first wife doesn't let you talk, she doesn't let you go anywhere, and she doesn't fuck you. Because he cuts the tongue out so they can't talk. He cuts the legs off so that they can't go anywhere, and he doesn't have any like sexual assault or anything with them. And just Johnny Depp being like, she doesn't fuck you, and then like looking and they don't respond, and he's like, she doesn't fuck you. Get it? It's funny if you've been married. Like it's very uncomfortable. And then he says that he thinks that he met him for real like 2 years ago. And we got to this like weird ass flashback scene where like Howard is like pretending to be like slow and like like a stupid Southern person. It's a really weird scene. It doesn't have any bearing on literally anything that happens in the plot ever. It's just there, I think, to give Johnny Depp more things to do, but it's very strange, and the filter over it is strange. It's just not it. You can fully cut it from the film, and it makes no difference. So then they just Johnny Depp's character, because I don't know how to say it, so I'm going to refer to him as Johnny Depp's character. It says that in one of the bodies they found a small bit of tibia bone in the hole in the roof of the mouth. And that's where you sort of find out that he uses the tibia bone to make the tusks that go inside the body. That's where you sort of like put two and two together, is at that part. And then we cut to Howard doing another weird monologue, which leads to him singing yet again to Mr. Tusk. And it's just a lot. And the whole time Wallace is like moaning and crying. And then he gives him a mackerel to eat, which is a very exciting thing because Wallace hasn't eaten yet. And there's a very dramatic, like, anime style, like, close up of like Wallace and the mackerel, and then he like walks over and moans and eats it, and it's like this big thing. And then they get into then you cut to Allie and Teddy and Le Point, Johnny Depp, in a car, and Johnny Depp is like, hey, so like in order to find out where he went, we need to figure out like what his mannerisms are, like what are his rituals when you get in the car. Like some people need coffee, they need music, they need like, what does he need? And Allie's like, oh, he loves getting like big stupid souvenir cups from convenience stores. So they go to A to Z, and they talk to the two bitchy girls behind the counter, and they're like, oh my god, it's Mr. Mustache. And they hand over the notepad that he wrote the address on, and they do that like thing that they do in spy movies where they like rub a pencil, like graphite, over the notepad, and then like whatever the indentation is like, it shows up, and they're like, oh, this is where he went. Very like spy movie shit. So he does that. And then they're like, all right, let's go. And then it cuts to Howard and Wallace swimming together. And Howard is like naked. Like old man, fully naked. And he explains that he ended up killing and eating Mr. Tusk about like 2 or 3 minutes before a boat came to the island and saved him. So he feels this immense guilt because he murdered this like beautiful creature for no reason. And he realizes that man is like more savage than beast and whatever. One of those very like Jigsaw moment. And then I wrote, why is he swimming naked? Like, why did we need to see old man butt in this film? Like, there was no reason for that. And then we cut back to Johnny Depp, Haley Joel Osment, and Allie. Don't know her name. And there's a joke where he's like, all right, we're about to enter this house, and he could be dangerous. Like, you each need a gun. And Teddy's like, I don't want a gun. And he's like, what do you mean you're American? What do you mean you don't want a gun? What American doesn't want a gun? And Allie's like, take the fucking gun. And then like he grabs it, and it's like a joke that like Americans like shooting people. Ha ha ha. And the whole scene you can kind of see Haley Joel Osment like breaking. Like you can kind of see him like with a slight smile the whole scene because Johnny Depp is just being like the absolute most the whole time. Which is just really enjoyable to watch. And then Howard explains that he has to fight Wallace as a walrus in order to like redeem himself, and he's like, we need to fight to the death or whatever. And so Howard is now like also in a walrus suit. um and then the friends end up busting in. There's like this whole scene where it's like cutting back between the fight scene and them running through the house and like blah blah blah. But they come in just to see Wallace like stab Howard repeatedly in the chest. Like the way that he wins is that he stabs him in the foot, which like makes him like topple over, and then he starts stabbing him in the chest repeatedly with the tusks, killing him. And then it looks like LePointe comes in with his like shoddy, and it looks like he's gonna shoot him. And then it kind of like cuts to black and goes like 1 year later. And you see Teddy and Allie visiting him with like a mackerel in a newspaper. It looks like a clutch. At the Manitoba Exotic Animal Sanctuary. She's like, Wallace, we're here. And then it like, from how she does it, it looks like she like casually throws a mackerel, but then it launches like so fucking far into his exhibit. And it's wild. Like you watch it back and you're like, there's no way that with that toss, she would have made it that far. Like there's absolutely no way, which I just thought was funny. And pretty like par for the course for this film. And then I just wrote, again, the seams around his eyes on the prosthetic are honestly pretty nicely done. And then it cuts to a story that she's telling Wallace about how when her grandma was dying at the funeral, her grandpa was crying, and she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he was like, no, it's good to cry. It separates us from the animals. It shows that you have a soul, something like that. And then the end of the film is Allie being like, I love you. I love you. And then they like walk away, and then Wallace like crawls back into his little like home and is like crying. Like there's tears running down his face. And then fini. That's the end of the film. And thank God, because what a roller coaster that movie is. But it's just one of those films that is like so charmingly stupid. Like if my dad and I, our big thing, I've said it in a couple episodes before, but our big thing is like watching stupid movies together, like specifically stupid horror movies. One of our favorites, I want to do an episode on it because it's ridiculous, is called, it was The Basement, I think. And it was so dumb, and we had such a blast just tearing it apart while we watched films. If for those of you who are like interested as to like how I watch movies, if any of you are familiar with Cinema Sins on YouTube, or like, I think he has like music video sins now and stuff like that, but go check him out. He's really, really funny. But Cinema Sins is kind of how I watch movies for the most part. Like if there's a continuity error, I'll probably catch it. If there's a plot point that doesn't make sense, I'll catch it. Like I watch movies like that, and it's fun for me. So especially when a movie is purposefully bad, it's fun to sort of pick it apart. Because if they're trying to make it bad, a lot of times it'll still have a lot of like consistencies, and there won't be any like continuity errors. Whereas when you're watching a film that takes itself really seriously, you can find a lot of continuity errors, which is always fun. But so I just wanted to do a movie like this because the past two that I've done, I feel like are what I would consider to be classic movies. Like, yes, Chucky's ridiculous, and yes, Leprechaun is ridiculous. If you haven't listened to those episodes, look at me. I'm so good at this now. Plugging my own episodes. Go back and check it out. Leprechaun is going to be an annual thing. So if you go check out the first one, then, around St. Patrick's Day this coming year, like 2021, I'll do another like Leprechaun 2. So go check out the first one and then get excited for the second one, But I feel like those are still classics. Like, yes, they're ridiculous and they're campy, but I feel like people know those. They've had sequels. They've made it. Like Chucky, has like up to like 8 or 10 movies in the franchise now. And same with Leprechaun, honestly. It has like 6, 7, maybe 8, including like a reboot that happened in like 2018 or 2019 or something like that. So those are like popular films. This is just weird. It's a weird movie. It's a weird blend of like scary movie humor and then also like taking itself really seriously, and it has good actors, so you're believing everything they're saying. It's just so ridiculous what they're saying. It's a good time. I would definitely recommend seeing it even if you know what happens, because I can't do the dialogue justice. Like I truly can't describe how strange and uncomfortable a lot of those scenes are. Like you have to experience it to know what it's like. So go watch it. It used to be on Netflix. I think it's on Amazon Video now is how I watched it. You can probably find it on the internet for free somewhere, though I don't condone getting movies illegally, because that's totally not how I watch movies sometimes. But, you're going to do what you're going to do. But you should watch it. It's a pretty funny movie. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have today. I know that this is a longer episode. My movie ones tend to be. I like to go through and talk about the film and give a plot and my little tidbits of info in there. And for those of you that are wondering about fashion reviews of this movie, it's fine. Nobody's egregious. Nobody's wearing anything that really makes me upset, like in Chucky. Nothing really makes me as mad as that stylist. So, for those of you wondering, because I've had a couple people be like, I think it's really funny that you decide to talk about outfits when someone's getting murdered. The outfits were fine. Nothing extraordinary. Justin Long really shouldn't ever grow facial hair, though. I have a firm belief that he really just can't. He shouldn't. And honestly, neither should Michael Park. I think they should both stay clean shaven. I think it's better for them. But anyway, that's my personal opinion. A couple things before I go. I just want to say thank you all so much for the support that you guys have given me over the last couple months. I know that season 2 ended and this is the start of season 3, and normally I would take a little bit of a break in between seasons just to sort of take time to recuperate. This is a lot of work to do this podcast once a week. And especially when I was doing it twice a week, that was insane, and I was working all the time on it. So it's nice to take a little bit of a break, but also, why would I do that right now during quarantine? This is mostly what I'm doing to bring myself joy, and so I want to continue to do it. So season 3 is just starting out, fresh. But I want to sort of keep seasons to 15 episodes, so I wanted to cut and continue. But if you guys wanted to support me any further, the best thing that you can do is share this podcast, especially right now. This is going up in October. October is spooky month. It's spooky season. This is the time for people to listen to this podcast. This is the time that people want scary content. Please shoot people my Instagram, shoot people the website, whispersfrombelow.com. The Instagram is whispersfrombelow, no spaces, no capitals, no underscores, no nothing. Give them a Spotify link. If you think they're going to like an episode about Death Note, or they're going to like the episode about Jeffrey Dahmer, shoot them the episodes you think they'll like. And then if they like it, they'll continue to listen. This podcast means so much to me, and it's already picked up speed this month. I've gotten definitely more listeners this month than I have in the past. And I would really love to keep that listener base growing, because the more listeners I get, the more cool stuff I can put out for you guys. And the more cool things can happen, and this podcast can really grow into something special. Not that it isn't. Right now it's special to me and a select few of you that listen to this every week. I appreciate you and I see you. But a bigger audience means that I have a bigger budget for more stuff that I can do, That leads me into if you haven't already, please check out the merch page on the website. I ordered a couple things from it myself. I got a t-shirt that says Listeners From Below. I got a fanny pack. I got stickers. They're all really great quality. They're all amazing. They feel good. They're strong. I use the fanny pack pretty much every single day. And it's held up. It's very sturdy. It's well constructed. And I think it's really cute. I spent a lot of time making all the merch, and I think it looks really great. You can also sign up to be a member. I will say I'm still figuring out how I can shoot blasts of hey, an episode's coming out this week that, check it out or whatever. The easiest way to stay updated on the podcast as of right now is by going to the Instagram, Whispers From Below, no spaces, no underscores, no capitals, no nothing. I try to post there a couple times a week just to keep everybody updated on what's going on and how life is working and whatever. If an episode isn't going to go up for any reason, That's probably the place to check. Due to like technical failure or vacation time or something, that's probably the place to go because I'll post about it. Um, Other than that, if you're interested in my personal life, you can follow my personal Instagram account, which is JUTIN_geese, like the animal. I'm basically just a makeup account at this point. I post more of my like own opinions and my own personal life on that account. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, please go check that out as well. And that's pretty much it. So remember, apparently man is a walrus on the inside. Canada is wild and crazy. Like, what are y'all doing up there? And please continue to wear a mask and stay safe and vote. This election is very important, and I don't normally get political, but please vote. It's very important that your vote goes in because it does matter.